because I saw yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that you ever hear of that Modern Wisdom podcast?
No.
Well, anyways, this guy, Chris Williamson, he's been around for a while. I mean, he's the guy I was telling you about who started the vlog and ended up with Lyme disease, and then he recorded it, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, he did a recent podcast of his was with Matt McConaughey, the actor.
Okay.
Right. And it was on masculinity. Right. And, you know, Matt McConaughey was like kind of talking about how difficult it is, especially in the post MeToo era, you know, because like suddenly, you know, the environment that men have to navigate in is, or at least according to McConaughey's view, it's like they can't tell the difference between a Harvey Weinstein and Aziz Ansari or whatever, the comedian who.
He had. I vaguely remember the story, but something along the lines of like he took a woman out on a date and he I guess was really trying to have sex with her. I guess they didn't end up doing anything, but I guess it was just kind of like she felt uncomfortable because he was like applying a lot of pressure or something along those lines.
It's the line where, he just thought he was being, hey, you know, we went out on a date, we had a good time, we're here at my place. You know, usually when all of those things happen, when the woman agrees to come back to your place, that usually means, at least in my mind, it means that, well, all right, we're going to get intimate. But now you're here and you're not following the script, and I'm trying different ways to see if I can get that door open, and eventually it didn't, so you went home. Right. Now you were uncomfortable. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, but it got equated in the media with what he did was no different from what Harvey Weinstein and those people were doing.
Right, which is, I guess, kind of what I was talking about. Like, I don't know, this it kind of reminds me of the black and white view of the world. It's like either you're a sexual predator or you're not. Whereas, like, you know, there's like, I guess it's like there's a spectrum almost. Like, that, I guess what I'm trying to say is what Aziz Ansari did seems more like, say this right, but a byproduct of the patriarchy. It's like men have set up this society where men are the most important and we run everything. And we think that we should just be able to get whatever we want. If we're persistent enough, we'll get it, right? So is that bad? I do agree that that's bad. Like, you know, if you're interested in somebody of the opposite sex or the same sex for that matter, I mean, there is a little bit of pursuit involved, but there's, it's like when the other person is pushing back, I think it's important to listen to them.
Well, yeah, and you raise a good point. I mean, even though we may be aware of the toxic consequences of a white supremacist patriarchal society. Okay. You know, if that's the standard, right. And that seems to be what everyone agrees on. What to do about it is where the argument is, right.
Yeah.
But some people want to preserve it.
Right.
Well, it's the way it is. And that's the Western civilizational story and what have you. And other people say, well, no, that's excluded all of us, right, from full participation in how the society is structured and all of that kind of stuff. But going back to the conversation, between McConaughey and, I want to say his name is Chris Williamson, but anyway, that navigating that change. Right. Well, yeah, all of this stuff used to be normal. Nobody said anything, at least in public. Now, you might have like the groups of like the women that are getting together for coffee and they're sitting there complaining about the way that men treat them all the time in public. And you may have, the blacks sitting there talking about the way that they're treated in amongst themselves, right? But as soon as that goes from in amongst themselves, the oppressed group, into, oh, now we want our voices as part of this bigger conversation, it freaks everybody out, right? And yeah, I don't want to.
What is that? I don't know. What is that? Equality feels like oppression when you've been.
I know the phrase you're talking about. Yeah,
but
it's not. It's if you've been on top.
If you're like privileged, equality feels like oppression
to you,
right? If you've been part of the privileged class, which I think is part of that, it kind of ties into that as well. It's like men for a long time have been used to. I actually just found out recently that up until 1993, it was perfectly legal to rape your wife or grape or whatever, sexually assault your wife. I mean, I'm sure, I think it was a specific state was the last state to take this law off the books, but essentially there was no such thing as
sexual assault in a marriage.
In a marriage, because essentially your wife is your property. So how can I,
Well, yeah, that goes back to our human exceptionalism thing. Like,
right.
Once it's my property, I can do anything I want with it. It becomes an object instead of a person.
Like she said in the book, are women people? Are women human? Yeah.
Yeah, what was that? The Great Unlearning.
Yeah.
It was interesting, because I told you I was going over the book again with a little bit more detail, and now like trying to make sure that it fits in this picture I'm trying to put together.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting was at one point in the book, and it was during the part where she's like making the connection between like racism and all that kind of stuff explicit from the human exceptionalist frame, and how that tracks right over onto racist attitudes and what have you.
Yeah.
And she made a mention of a writer, I want to say Afko, APH is the first name and KO is the last name. And apparently this woman is a writer on intersectionality.
Okay.
And according to her take, that racism and speciesism are two sides of the same coin. So we're not going to be able to really do anything about racism unless we address the speciesism first. And I read that and I went, that's one of those things I think that young men react against. Like it's one thing to confront a young white man and say, hey, you know what? You have some unchallenged racist attitudes that you may be unaware of, right? And that person might say, no way. And then you show them and then they're like, oh, yeah, you know what? God, I hadn't realized that. But if you then tell them, oh, and on top of changing those racial attitudes, you have to quit like looking at dogs and cats as being lesser than you. You've got to bring them up into the same moral framework. And there's a lot of that. We touched on it a little bit when we were talking last week about one of the difficulties that a lot of young men are facing is because they're not so much being told what a healthy masculinity is. They're being shown all the ways that being a man is not cool, right?
Yeah, there's it's a.
And I think if you whack them with an intersectionality bat when they're just waking up, yeah, that's going to send them the other way. And I don't really know. It's just something that when I was reading the book yesterday again, it was in my mind. And in fact, I saw that paragraph and I just lingered on it for a while because I was like, ooh, because I had just seen the video where Matt McConaughey and Chris Williamson were talking. And so I have that, Matt McConaughey's, question was hanging in the air. It's like, yeah, well, what are men supposed to do in that situation where the things that they thought was normal are suddenly aren't, but they're not being told, okay, here's a new set of rules, right? Here's how you do it, right? Here's what we want, right?
Yeah.
And I think because in a lot of ways that in the same way that men are off balance, a lot of women are off balance too. They don't, because they're stuck with the story of, well, here's what men are supposed to do for you, right? As a man in that, well, the man owns you kind of way, but they don't really, it's not presented that way, of course. But at the same time, they're also inhaling the same story of empowerment. So maybe there's some confusion there that that the messages that are coming out to these young men are confusing. Like on the one hand, yes, they don't want the toxic masculinity. They don't want all that macho posturing and all that kind of stuff. But they also want the man to be the breadwinner, protector, kind of thing. And maybe that's confusing. I mean, it's, I'm almost 70 now. I don't know what it's like to be 16, 17 and facing that.
I would agree that in a lot of ways it is confusing because you have ultimately the patriarchy, which is a kind of a byproduct of human exceptionalism, tying it back to the arrogant ape again. But so you have this uprising or this, revolution. The correct word is escaping me right now, but basically you have women standing up and some men with them too, hey, women are people, women are human and deserve the same respect and the same opportunities and that any man gets, right? And which I believe is true. But because of the patriarchy is so ingrained in the story, the mother culture story, it's like, yeah, you're getting it from both sides. It's like, all right, you have the toxic masculinity is bad. Not masculinity, toxic. It's like taking these masculine traits and to the extreme.
Turning them up to 11.
Right, yeah, so there's that, and then you have, so it is confusing, and it's like, you want to respect, people, women, you want to give them agency, and but then some women, I guess some women, it's like they're listening to the mother culture story of the patriarchy too, so it's like, so my point is saying all that it is confusing. Like, what do? I have this woman that I'm interested in and, I want to give her her own agency, but then she also wants me to be a protector and a provider. And I guess it's like finding the balance. I mean, I guess with all things,
this is just me and I speak only for myself in this regard.
Yeah.
But when I was, after your mother left and the custody thing was all sorted out, I had you, and now I'm trying to date, and it, like, on the one hand, okay, equality, right? I'm a working man, you're a working woman. We are talking, we seem to like each other's company. Hey, let's go out to dinner, right? But then the expectation, boom, I pick up the tab. And it happened a couple of times where I'm sitting there and okay, the bill comes and I don't immediately reach for my wallet to see if she reaches for a purse or whatever. And she's just sitting there. And then I realize, oh, okay, yep, I got to do this. And sure enough, I pull out my wallet and I put the credit card or cash on the thing and there's no offer, coming. And I'm not resentful. I'm not angry about it. But when I get home, I'm thinking, yeah, what about this equality thing? We're both divorced. We're both struggling with, young children at home and we're, trying to make ends meet. And we're both looking to, be in a relationship. And yet that that expectation is just there. Well, that's just the way it is because hell, well, from the time that I was a little kid, that's the way I was raised, that when you ask a woman out, you better be prepared to pay the tab. Don't ask her out if you're not prepared to pay for it.
Right.
And so I think, all right, that's what I'm supposed to do. But in the back of my mind, I have liberated women, their agency. They don't want to be owned by a man. And then you get that sort of that toxic masculine expectation. Hey, I paid for dinner and all this kind of stuff. You know, you owe me. And I hope I hope nobody's offended by that. But that seems to be almost part of the underlying subtext of why the Aziz Ansari story got blown up so much.
And that's actually a really, and I've heard men say that, you know, it's like, I paid for dinner, so you owe me. You
actually heard that, huh?
Uh-huh.
Ugh. You're not friends with those guys, I hope.
No.
Okay, good.
But like, or even, you know, it was a joke, but it's how a lot of men think, where in this show, The Boondocks, where one of the characters, Riley, was basically saying like, he was calling this woman a hoe, right? And, you know, his brother Huey's basically saying, you know, not all women are hoes. And then so Riley goes on this little monologue about basically like, I'm paying for dinner. So, or even, you know, I'm paying. So whether it's a actual prostitute or a regular woman, there's money coming out of my pocket. So in my view, they're all prostitutes, right? Which is obviously, but the thing is the reason why jokes like that land is because it's like, there are people that think like that. And, you know, you're making fun of them, obviously, the show, you know, and, you know, and then he ends it off by saying something about, why don't I just give her the money I was going to spend on dinner and she could go buy some groceries or something, you know, that was kind of like the punchline part of it. But yeah, it was like, but yeah, that idea is prevalent with men. So it kind of, I guess, the paying for dinner kind of feeds into that, you know, patriarchy, because theoretically, right?
Well,
if you look at it from the other way, like in the 50-50, like I ask a woman to go out, we go out on a date, she pays for her meal, I pay for my meal. I didn't pay for anything. So like, you know, now obviously there's going to be men that'll probably still expect, you know, well, we went out on a date, you know.
Well,
but,
yeah, I mean, women, yeah, I mean, as far as like what people, you don't want to start like projecting what people are expecting. It's just more when you get into this, like young men, you know, and if young men are getting lost to this toxic, you know, violent, misogynistic, racist, you know, worldview, because there's nothing like pulling them into the alternative. You know, we're just looking at like reactions and this, what is it? The water that they have to swim through. You know, and I thought, I didn't watch the whole conversation between McConaughey and Chris Williamson because I was in the middle of something else and it was just on the TV while I was, you know, going around the house. So I do want to sit down and watch the whole conversation to see, you know, if they really did land on what they thought might have been a healthier definition of masculinity here in 2025 and going forward. But I thought right at the end when I had something else to do, the last bit of the conversation I heard was like McConaughey had turned the question back around to Chris as the host. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you say masculinity is? And it was interesting because, and I think that's probably why I allowed myself to become diverted, because I felt like instead of Chris coming up and saying, well, this is what he thought, he started his answer by listing, like, I guess, people that he's interviewed, like some of their definitions of masculinity. And in the back of my mind, I said, no, he asked you, Chris. He didn't.
Yeah.
And so I'll, and to be fair to both of them, it's on in my YouTube of continue watching queue. So I'll finish watching it at some point.
Yeah, it is definitely like you hear a lot about that, like what a real man is or what a real man is not, and I don't know. Sometimes it's like I don't know, like what does it mean? Because like a man, at least in the most basic definition, is a male human.
Well, yeah, once you get past that, but now you move from the biological reality, okay, male, female, boom, right? And that, you can't escape that categorize, right?
But yeah.
But then you get into, well, now the social group that these beings exist in have standards for, okay, the male does these things and the female does these things, and they look this way and they take part in these activities and what have you. And we're in a cultural moment where all of those things that held it all together for a long time are falling apart. I mean, if you go back and, and this again, like, that's why the Ishmael frame and that resonated with me when it landed in my mind, and why I tossed the book at you, because it was just, it showed me that a lot of what I'm trying to figure out today is just really built on what story I choose to tell. And we have the map laid out by Quinn, right? That at the start of the agricultural revolution, this myth got inverted, and the civilization that grew up as a result of that had this upside down idea of man's relationship to the world. And everything that's been built since then, at least under that story, has accelerated the destruction of the natural environment, right? That's the main part of it.
Yeah.
But then you have all of these other civilizational stories. Well, how did civilization start? Well, it was, we have Greece, and then, that happened. But then over there in the Indian subcontinent, that civilization was growing. Oh, a little further east over in China, that civilization was growing. And somehow or another, all of them have that baked in separateness. Or maybe they didn't at first, but when they encountered the West, that idea seeped in, and how do you tear all that apart? Well, now you've got, I've got a library of 1,200 books, and I can tell multiple stories in those about how the world got to be this way. And yet the dominant story that's tearing everyone apart is this. On the one side is a group of people that have been excluded from a role in deciding how the society is structured, right?
Right.
They've been a part of it, and they've been used by the people in power, but they haven't been able to access that design level, where we get to decide what the society is like. Right. So you've got women and LGBTQ plus, and you've got blacks and other ethnic minorities that are all saying, hey, we'd like to have we'd like to have a little bit of input into the design of the system because we have to live in it.
Because each one of those groups has their own story, right? You know, and that's kind of the thing. It's like each group has its own story. Like there's this story of, you know, American exceptionalism, but then there's a whole bunch of people that's been living in this country since its inception who are like, nah. You know, it's like you know, make America great again, but there's a whole section of the population that's like, nah, America's never really been great.
At least not for us.
Not for us.
You know.
Right? So their story should be heard as well.
And well, think about this. How good are you at holding like multiple perspectives in your head at the same time?
Probably not really good at it. It's hard, I think, to step out of yourself.
For any length of time. I mean, I assume you can if you're talking to someone at work who goes to church all the time. You can look at the world through that perspective while you're talking to them.
Right.
Without, you know, I mean, you can disagree on certain points if it really is, if it really does have a meaningful impact on what you're going to do in the world. You know, you can say, oh, I don't agree with that and that. But you can put yourself in his perspective. Well, yes, okay, you understand God and you believe that this is going to happen. All right, so that's why you have the opinion that you have. And you can let that go. You can step into that perspective for a little bit. But you can't live every day holding your perspective and his perspective and the perspective of, say, an LGBTQ Latina. You can't hold all of those perspectives in your mind at the same time when you're navigating your way through the world.
Yeah.
And when you have, at least one of the things, and I'm not really convinced, I haven't really convinced myself that this is the way it is, but I do think about it. Maintaining multiple perspectives. And one of the things is that because like on the one side of the debate in the culture wars is we need to get back to our Judeo-Christian Western civilization, enlightenment, rationality. That's the story we need to pick up and keep running with, because that's got us here to this glorious place that we're at.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have this fragmented bunch of voices, because it's all these little people that were crushed by the white supremacist machine.
Right.
And so now you're trying to, on the one side, I have one perspective that I keep in my head. Everything fits. On the other side, it's almost like what is that? The fly eye with all those little, you know, it's like a...
Oh, like a bunch of little...
Pentagons or whatever they are. And so you get this fragmented visual field. And that's kind of what like the left is, because it's the whole intersectionality thing. And when you really get into intersectionality, the deeper you go, the more things are impacting you. And suddenly now you're asking someone who's trying to find their way into the world, trying to figure out if they're going to go to college or just get a job, still trying to navigate the early days of the dating scene, and we all remember how that can be, right? And they're trying to navigate all this stuff, right? And how do I acknowledge all these different perspectives without stepping on somebody's toes accidentally? Yeah.
And I would argue that slowly, as you're taking in these perspectives while, you know, or trying to put yourself in these other people's perspectives, not that you can ever fully put yourself in their perspective or understand, but I think that over time, as you do it, it starts changing your own perspective to where now, you know, I'm not part of the LGBTQ group, but you know, I can understand, you know, like being oppressed, I guess, or the different things that they have to go through, you know. So over time, as you're like talking to these people and you're listening to their stories and like really listening to their stories, you know, your own perspective starts shifting to where, yeah, I'm not, you know, I don't get harassed or anything like that because of my sexuality, but like I can understand that that's a problem and that, you know.
So are you saying that just being exposed to these other perspectives without being asked to accept them necessarily, but just to be exposed to them is going to soften your singular view over time?
I think that it helps, especially if you're consciously trying to understand.
All right.
You
So
know, it's not just a matter of, you know, because there's plenty of, you know, there's plenty of prejudiced, bigoted people that, you know, interact with various minorities every day, but they still hold on to these beliefs. It's like I remember you said a long time ago, you know, something along the lines of, you know, it's harder to be racist or prejudiced against people like when you're going to Starbucks and the person that's, you know, giving you your, you know, checking you out at the cashier is LGBT or black or Hispanic or, you know, whatever, and they're a very nice person, you know, and you see, oh, you know, this is just a regular person just like me, you know, but somehow people live like that and still manage to be like not see other people as human or deserving of respect, even though they're interacting with these various minority intersectionality groups of people. But that goes back to being because you want to understand, you want to be a better person, or it's like you can't, if you're just stuck in your own head and not caring about your own, I guess, personal evolution or whatever, then you can be exposed to all this stuff and still be a bigot. I mean, there's 80-year-old bigots out there that probably, you know, lived with, you know,
I'm
lived
sure.
in the, you know, in New York City, you know.
I'm sure there are.
New York City, where you can't walk 5 feet without running into a whole bunch of different ethnic groups, you know.
That's true.
I mean, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit with
yeah.
5 feet, but, you know, you could walk 10 blocks and you know.
You're going to counter everybody.
Yeah.
You know.
I saw this video on the Jackson Heights area of Queens, and it's like there's the guy that was making the video was basically talking about how, you know, you could get like 30 different, or no, somebody he was talking to on the street, I think, was like, you could get 30 different countries' food within, you know, a few block radius. You know, if you want Peruvian food, you go right over there. If you want Jamaican food, it's over there. If you want, you know,
Korean barbecue, it's over there.
It's like, and across the street from that is the Indian food place or whatever, you know, like.
Yeah, you've got halal over here. You've got that over there. Yeah.
But I'm sure there's still, you know, people, racist, prejudiced, bigoted people in those areas, because I think they're just holding on to that.
Well,
that belief.
Yeah. Now you start to get into, well, what if you can encounter people in your day-to-day life in all these different groups that are not all these different groups that you're not a member of.
Right.
Whatever group that I slapped a label on my forehead, whatever group that I'm in, I still have to leave my front door, and I'm going to be interacting with a whole bunch of other people that have different labels stuck to their forehead.
Right.
And if I can't acknowledge their existence, right? And this seems to be the problem. It's not that I can't acknowledge their existence. I do that. I just acknowledge their existence in a way that says I wish that they didn't exist.
Right.
And that's where we're having the problem.
Yeah. Because it's not even like necessarily like they should just go over there and do that stuff. You know, that's one of the things that really like confuses me about the whole kind of conserving whatever that we have, you know, that whole conservative side it's like, it's not really just about like, I want to conserve my way of life. It's that I want to eliminate the other ways of life. You know, it's not good.
Well, I think it's what I'm hearing. I'm cutting you off, and I know you don't like that, but what I'm hearing you say is that it's kind of like, it's not enough for me to live the way that I want to live. It's that knowing that you exist
is a problem
for me. So I can't live the way that I want to live, even though I never see you. Just knowing that you exist makes my life miserable. So I have to eliminate you.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like, I guess, I mean, I could use we've been talking about the LGBTQ, so we'll just like, it's the gay marriage.
Okay.
You know, like this whole fight over, like, people are like, no, and no gay marriage. They can't get married. Marriage is between a man and a woman and blah, 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 all this stuff. But it's like, one, do you even know any gay people? Like, besides just, you know, like we said, interacting with them just out in the world. But I mean, do you actually have any gay friends? Probably not. Even if you do, it's irrelevant, because what does that have to do with you? What does it have to do with you?
Well, one of the arguments that I've heard is that the institution of marriage, right? This is a social institution. It was, created for specific purposes in order to ensure societal stability, right? Okay, fine. You say, okay, and it's between a man and a woman. And for the purpose of procreation, to make families, right, to keep the society going. All right. And that's an overly simplified version, but fair enough. And then you say, okay, well, but if you allow Steve and Dave to get married, or Kathy and Jane to get married, they can't do the thing that marriage is supposed to do, which is create a family and raise it and do all that. And it freaks them out. Now, you and I struggle with understanding why that's a problem, because if Steve and Dave get married, that has absolutely no effect on Bill and Sally and their family. They still can do what they want to do. They can still take their kids to church. They can still do all the things that they want to do. And Steve and Dave will have their family, however they do it, whether they adopt underprivileged kids or however, they want to demonstrate their commitment to societal stability. That's up to them. But it really, the against gay marriage side seems to want to say that that existence of, gay people getting married somehow has an effect on your relationship. Just, I can't make the connection.
I can't either, which is why it's so hard for me to wrap my head around, because it's like, it's, okay, let's say you mentioned procreation, obviously if everyone was gay, then I mean, we could still procreate. Maybe people could just, get together and just to do it. But
distastefully. Ooh, I gotta,
or maybe it'll turn
we
in,
have to make,
or
we
maybe,
have to make more humans,
or maybe it'll turn into the Brave New World, and it's like, you know what, we've industrialized making babies.
Oh,
right?
They decant them now.
Yeah, well, that's it. We're no more but.
Ugh.
Even if you use, I guess my point, even if you use the procreation argument as far as like, oh, well, they can't have kids. Okay, well, like what percentage of the world population is actually, homosexual? I don't know for sure, but it's fairly low because I walk around and I see heterosexual couples everywhere I go, and I sometimes see gay couples. So,
again, part of that is the invisibility. Like if you're actively like excluded, like people really don't even want to know that you exist, well, then you're going to hide.
Right. That's part of it.
Part of, the issue is, I guess today, is just that we took that veil down.
Yeah.
Right. And so people who used to hide are like, oh, I don't have to hide anymore now. And so maybe it just seems like there's this flood of LGBT and trans and all this stuff just coming out of the woodwork. But no, they were always there. It was just the, you turn the lights on now. And you saw them. They were always in the room. You just turn the lights on and suddenly they become visible is all it is.
Yeah, it's also a part of it is just the representation in media as well. There's, because most people, like we talked about before turning on the podcast, let's be real, most people don't read books. They watch TV, Netflix, whatever, they watch some kind of video on something, and that's the only information that they're really getting. So it's like,
speaking
all of a sudden, I'm 30 years ago, I watched TV and, maybe there might be a gay character here and there. They were usually, at least in the sense of like the gay male characters, they were usually very effeminate, and a lot of times they were played off for laughs. It was like a joke or whatever.
30 years ago, they started putting gay characters, but that's exactly what it was. They were a caricature. They weren't like a fully developed human being, and they were always like the source of the joke, the humor. Was always between the way that you interacted with the gay character.
And as once that started, I mean, and you go back even further, there was really no gay characters, right? So now in 2025, there's more media. It's still generally, white dominated or straight, heterosexual dominated stories, but there's more representation for the LGBT community. So it feels like, oh, it's everywhere, but it's like you said, it's like you just they've always been there, all the way back to the I one of those people was talking about like the Roman, all the way back then, the Roman, and it's always
it. As far as like the presence of homosexuality or alternate non-heterosexual behavior, historically it's been everywhere, and different cultures have different ways of expressing it. And I've only just seen like a couple of like documentaries on those kinds of things, so I wouldn't be able to speak with any any level of authority on that. But at least today, those characters are being presented as human, right? They're people, right? They're not a caricature of the overly effeminate or whatever. And I mean, there are still men that behave that way, but that's that's their authentic expression of however they see themselves, which is fine, But I was thinking in terms, and I'm sure this is wrong. It's just the way my mind works sometimes. You know how it is. But we've talked about how, like, when you buy a new car, oh, you're looking at a car and you want to have something that's unique. It's like, nobody else, not a lot of these on the road kind of thing. And so you've shopped, you've done all your due diligence, and then you buy that car. And as you're driving it home, you see they're like all over the place. And it's that, I think there's an actual term for it that, you suddenly start seeing something that was always there. And I was wondering if that's kind of the same thing with like the LGBTQ plus, community, as far as their portrayal in the media, and that, or at least the way that people react to it. It's suddenly, it was always there, but now you've become aware of it because, okay, your attention's been drawn to it. Well, by the media that you're consuming about, oh, it's this, the culture war framing of it.
Yeah, I think...
And then that makes you more aware of how many places you're seeing it.
I think that's definitely in play. I mean, I think we touched on it before.
We can get some traction out of that, you think?
Yeah, well, no, because it is a lot of what the media is highlighting is what people find important, right? Like, even though trans people have existed, like, once again for millennia, all of a sudden it's like a problem. I mean, I think I told the story, 20 years ago when I had a job where there was a transgender woman that worked there. And it's like, I don't know.
Well, I worked for Magnavox. There was a transgender.
Which was what, in the 80s?
85?
Right.
Yeah. 40 years ago.
And it's become like this boogeyman. Almost it feels like it's like, oh my God, they're trying to, like, at least once.
Well, yeah, it's this conversion of the existence of LGBTQ plus people into an ideology,
right?
Like we're trying to they're trying to convert us. Like, no, they're just, all they want is to be recognized as existing in the world. Period. Full stop. We're here. I know the saying, I'm not going to say it now, right? But like, we're here, we exist, just chill. That's all. And it's causing this reaction, and God knows where it comes from. But it's the story that you live in, right? And this again, we get back to the voice of mother culture, but even when it comes to, and it's something that I've talked to you a lot about over the course of your life. It's like, what world do you live in? Right? What world do you live in? What are you bringing into your head that's creating a picture of the world that you're then taking back out and interacting with?
Yeah.
Right. And that kind of goes back to our discussion when we talked about Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays. Because Lippmann was the guy who, he said, we really live in a pseudo-environment because there's the world, there's what happens, and then it comes into our heads, and then we build a picture and project that back out, and that projection is this pseudo-environment.
Yeah, and I've heard, there's various ways that this, I remember years ago, there was like, people are like so worried about, kids getting kidnapped or whatever.
Right. That big, the big scare in the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That was the whole McMartin preschool thing.
Was that what it, yeah.
Yeah. Where all these satanic and sexual things and cats getting sacrificed, all this, and they were all these implanted memories, but that, all of a sudden it went out through the media channels and people were living in that world and were reacting to that hype, to this story. It was like, what world are you living in? You pick your kids up from daycare every day. they're not acting all freaked out and everything. So why are you suddenly treating your kid like you're sending them into Satan's den?
Yeah.
Right. And that again comes back to, well, what information ecosystem, what media environment are you living in? Are you aware that that's real to the degree of how that's shaping how you go out into the world?
Right. And it's everywhere you look, it's something, right now it's, these cities are overrun with, whatever protesters, and they're just destroying everything. And then
and then you actually turn on the TV and you see people dressed up as chickens and frogs.
Yeah. Or it's, it's like one block, there's just like one protest, or that's maybe a couple blocks, but when they paint it in the media, it's like these cities are under siege, and this it's one of the benefits, I think, of although I think there's a lot of bad things that have come about from this technology, the one good thing that at least that applies now, is the fact that people can just post something. They can take their phone out or their camera out, and be like, oh, this is happening right now, and then post it on various social medias. And so now you're starting, there's a different story that's available now, other than like the mainstream media story, which for the longest time was what dominated everything, ever since really, even back with newspapers, and, it's like.
Well, interesting. Like before we started recording today, I was telling you that since the therapeutic disaster almost 2 years ago, and all the pieces of my mental world that got scattered all over the floor, that with the the new therapist and all this other stuff, like I've managed to collect all the pieces and put them back into order, right? Or at least I've got a frame built, and it's a lot of it is about these stories that we tell, both the stories that I was told, growing up, and how that influenced my life. And then now, as you and I are talking about, life in the early 21st century here, it's how the environment that we all live in, the one that you grew up in, how you acquired your worldview through growing up with me, through the TV shows that you watch, through the music that you listen to, et cetera, and now how that influences the way that we look at the world today, the way that we interpret the events that are coming to us. At the same time, I hope that what is emerging out of our conversations is the contingent nature of those stories, and how fragile, they can be. And I don't mean fragile in the sense of they don't explain anything, but fragile in the sense that you can insert something else into it and change the way that you see the world. And suddenly that certainty that you had that this is the right thing to do and this is how you should be isn't quite so sure anymore. And that, I think, tones the temperature down when we're talking to individuals. Even when you and I have argued with each other, when you are convinced that you're right, or when I'm convinced that I'm right, we're not listening.
Most people aren't.
And so I think that as I look at even the way that people are telling stories today, I mean, we look at the things that are happening. You mentioned ICE a couple of times. There's the what people are filming and posting online that you can see with your own eyes. And it's not edited. It's not even commented. It's just, hey, it's 2:32 p.m. I'm on, the streets of Portland, and this is happening right now.
Right.
Here's a 2-minute video, done. Now you look at it and you interpret it, but how you interpret what you saw is going to be predicated on all the other things that you're reading or watching or putting into your head, podcasts that you listen to, interpretive frameworks, and those things come.
And you see it in the comment sections of those videos, because you'll see, the different perspectives that people are bringing to this, because you'll see one of those ICE videos and then it'll be like, you'll have people in the comments that are like, yeah, this is what, our tax dollars should be going to. But then, and then you have the other people that are like, what the fuck? Like, sorry, but like, it just, like, what do you like?
Yeah.
Regardless of, I guess, regardless of the criminal, citizen, non-citizen, like, some of it's just like disturbing to watch.
It's like, if you're watching someone be arrested, either, and whether that person is an actual criminal or just mistaken for one,
or just their papers expired, or
whatever,
they didn't,
that's one thing. But but it's the yanking people out of their cars. I saw one video where there was a family in a car. I guess the grandmother was filming, and when they got stopped, the agents, one of them had a gun drawn and was aimed at the driver, and another one had one of the billy clubs and was like beating on the door because they wouldn't open the door.
Yeah.
And this grandmother who's filming this is screaming, "There's a baby in the car." And then, like, the clip ended, so you didn't see the end of or at least I didn't see the end of the altercation. But in my mind, having grown up in the United States, that's the kind of stuff that I saw in the evening news that was happening in Venezuela or Guatemala or whatever, not on the streets of the United States. And so that, in my mind, in my worldview, in the information that I absorb, that says that is wrong. That should not be happening. But in those comment lines, you have these people that are living in an information ecosystem, and all the things that they're reading and absorbing says that, no, this is exactly what we need to do, because, these illegals are coming in and they're taking your health care, and you go to the hospital and you can't get care because they took care of some illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
Thing. And so, yeah, when they see something like that, they're like, yeah, right on, more of this. And so I hope, one of my naive hopes in our recording these conversations, at least to try to build a bridge between those two views, to say they're both valid. The person who says, this is wrong, this is not America, because of the information ecosystem that they live in, yeah, they're absolutely right for holding that position. And for the other person who's looking at it going, yeah, we need to do more, because of the information ecosystem that they live in, that's also true and real for them. So how do you build a bridge to at least say that both of those can be true, but neither are the whole story, right? That we need these people to be talking to each other to say, yes, we agree that we don't want, like, lawlessness running the streets, but at the same time, we don't want the government acting lawlessly.
Right.
And that way of doing things, because the people that are championing that, they have a concern, right, that's being amped up by whatever information ecosystem they're living in, and finding what that concern is, I think, is like the bridge. It's not to say that they're right for yanking people out of cars and treating them that way. and that goes back to the human exceptionalism thing, because the way you see them, it's like in your mind you go, you're treating them like animals, and then you go, wait a minute, do animals even deserve to be treated that way?
Right, like no, right. It's
and so all this stuff swirls around in my head, and I get confused sometimes.
And yeah, and ultimately, I don't think we're here to solve the world's problems, but at least get a conversation going. And I'll we'll probably wrap up here in a second. But
has it been an hour already?
Yeah, and I kind of there's something Marlon Wayans said. I don't want to get into the whole controversy about you probably don't know about it because it's just. But anyways, Marlon Wayans was talking about like a real man, and one of the things that he was able to say before he got interrupted or while he was getting interrupted was a real man needs to be able to unstrap from his ego. And I just kind of think that in general is kind of important, just, not just for men, for women. And, you're not necessarily right, or you are right in like what you were saying. You're right in coming to that view based on the information that you have, but you're not necessarily right in the sense that either you don't have all the information or, whatever.
Well, this is
being able to unstrap from your ego, I guess, is realizing that your opinion is not necessarily the only one or the most important one or is more important or less important than somebody else's. And at the end of the day, if we all kind of, I think, unstrapped from our ego, so to speak, we could move forward in a better direction, for overall, for just humanity in general.
Maybe hold on to your beliefs, but hold on loosely.
Yeah.
It seems like a good place to end.
Right. Like you don't want to not believe in anything, but you also don't want to believe it so hard that
you become rigid.
Yeah. But all right, I guess thank you for coming by again and giving us a little piece of your day. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe you opened your mind a little bit. Maybe our conversation helped you out a little bit. Who knows? Maybe it didn't. Or
maybe you were just bored out of your mind and you're going, what are these guys doing? Yeah. Either way, thanks for stopping by. Because if you made it this far, you're the kind of people that we're looking for.
Yeah. So
click like.
Yeah. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Comment. We like
yeah, and if my reply seems a little snarky, sometimes I'm answering comments at 2:30 in the morning and I'm still working on my first cup of coffee.
Yeah. But
thanks again for stopping by. My name is Doug.
I'm Mark, and this has been Occasionally Philosophical.